Here is Cheryl Kay.
Good evening. Thanks. Interesting in terms of the insanity that goes along with this disease. I was invited to join someone on a ride up here because I live in Temple Terrace, and I guess I'm supposed to start out this with, "Hi, I'm Cheryl, I'm an alcoholic." But since I haven't done this before, you have to excuse me. My home group is Mad Dogs in Temple Terrace, and my sobriety date is December 15th of this previous year. The insanity comes in when I thought I was just riding up here from Temple Terrace. I missed the part that said, "Oh, you're the 10-minute speaker." And so I'm outside going, learning. I'm the 10-minute speaker. So there is an insanity because I only hear what I want to hear. And that's true of whether I'm in meetings. It's true throughout my life. It's true through what I read in the big book. You know, it's unless I'm really connected with God, and that's something I say more and more and more frequently now. It goes right back to I only hear what I want to hear. I only listen to what I want to listen to because it's still all about me. And it's really hard to change that behavior. I mean, I've been drinking since I was a teenager, and something that occurred to me, and I was in a meeting and talking about this not too long ago, was that several years ago I went through a tragic time. I lost both of my parents in a very, very short period of time. And I've grown up in a house that was full of faith. Although I don't know that I really understood what that meant until I was going through that period of time when I was making life and death decisions for my parents, and it was all on my shoulders. And I truly, after just an incredible amount of frustration and fear and, I'm not equipped to do this, literally put my hands up and went, I can't do this. I can't. There's only one power. There's only my choice to call it God that can get me through this. And I literally, for the first time in my life, really just gave it up and went, I'm totally out of control here, and I'm going to trust. I'm not going to think. I'm not going to double check. I'm not going to cross check. I'm not going to, I'm just going to, what comes out of my mouth, kind of like what I'm doing right now, is going to be what I think is the right thing to do. My sobriety date may be this past December, but I have been coming to meetings for a while. And as the years have gone on, because I'm not a teenager any longer, there was a point where I realized I really have a problem with this because my life is unmanageable. I can screw something up in a heartbeat. And the first solution to that is to go buy wine, which would be my choice. And if that's not around, scotch. And if that's not around, beer. And if that's not around, whatever is around. And when I realized it was really getting nuts, because I maintain very well, I can hold down a job. I can, to a certain degree, fool just about everybody except when I come into these rooms and realize that doesn't work anymore. But, I have all these little stops in the morning on the way to work, So I've got the CVS because they have little 4-packs of wine. And this 7-Eleven doesn't, so we're not going there anymore. And, I'm going to work. And so I have this big story. I make gift baskets. We have a lot today, so I need 2 of these little 4-packs of wine. People believed me, at least I thought they did. Who knows what they really thought, It's like, oh, we missed you. I'm like, yeah, I hit the other store this morning. But it got to be nuts where I'm going through all of these crazy actions to find a way to drink. And to find a way to hide that I was drinking. And, I have stock in Altoids. It just got to be nuts. And so at some point in time there, I said, this is crazy, and I'm going to go to a meeting. And what was really interesting, the meeting that I went to was Mad Dogs in Temple Terrace. And at first I walked in, and there's a bunch of guys. And I'm going, okay, it doesn't say anything about this being a men's meeting. And they're like, oh, welcome. And I'm going, oh, great, I love to flirt. Perfect. I have a room full of drunk men. Awesome. Except they're not drunk. But I'm the one who just drank a bottle of wine before I walked into the room. However, they looked at me, and they looked right in my eyes, and there was so much care and so much concern and so much empathy. And I continued to do that for a while. And I wasn't fooling anybody, but I don't think they cared. They just kept going, come back, keep coming back. Just get your happy butt in this room, pay attention. I have pages of notes, really incredible things that people have said. And when I'm connected, I look at these things. When I'm not, this book is the last thing. I haul it around in my car and I go to a meeting and I throw it back in the back seat of the car. But I learned that there was so much empathy, and I learned that if I stay in the meetings, and it's not that meeting makers make it, but that if I stay in touch with my sponsor, if I call the people that I know that are there for me, and I still feel incredibly selfish because when they call me, they're checking on me. It's got nothing to do with, oh, maybe they need to talk to somebody. That doesn't even occur to me. I mean, I have to really think that way, that the world does not revolve around Cheryl. But when I practice this, when I pray and when I reach out to other people, it just has such an incredible impact on my life. And that faith that I grew up with has an entirely different dimension to it now. And I still have to work really hard to recognize those things. And something else that occurred to me, again, thinking about my parents over the last week or so, is that my father was an incredible alcoholic. He was not a good alcoholic. He was an ugly, incredibly self-centered person, which seems ridiculous to say in front of a room of more than likely self-centered people. But to me, he really floated the boat on that. And I don't know how I could have lived with him my entire life and seen that behavior without recognizing that same behavior in me, because it just wasn't there, and it took a lot of time. And I'm always so grateful for the people that I've met, for the people who have reached out to me, who have been there even when I walked into that room drinking. And, I do walk in, I don't stumble in, but, a little bit of a hug, and they're like going, whoo, smell wine. I'm like, not enough Altoids. But to realize that, my dad's behavior was so alien to what I was living. And so I'm grateful to be here today. And as much as I was standing outside going, no flipping way, I'm talking to these people. I'm really, really grateful. And for the newcomers, and especially for the young people, and I guess this is one of the things that really sticks to my heart, don't lose this. Don't wait 30 years to figure it out. If you've got the opportunity, stick with it, make it work, come back, read the book, reach out to people, work the program, because it truly will take you outside of yourself, and it will make you a better person. So thank you for your patience and your time, and I have Altoids in my car.
All right. Chris, could you come up and read the traditions, please? Where are they? Great. What? I know. What are you doing with me? Chris Boucher, I'm an alcoholic. Hi, Chris. 12 traditions. 1, our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. 2, for our group purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God as he may express himself in our group conscience. Our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. 3, the only requirement for AA membership is a desire to stop drinking. 4, each group should be autonomous except in matters affecting other groups or AA as a whole. 5, each group has but one primary purpose: to carry its message to the alcoholic who still suffers. 6, an AA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the AA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, prestige, and property divert us from our primary purpose. 7, every AA group ought to be self-supporting, declining outside contributions. 8, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. 9, AA as such ought never be organized, but we may create service boards or committees directly responsible to those they serve. 10, Alcoholics Anonymous has no opinion on outside issues, hence the AA name ought never be drawn into public controversy. 11, our public relations policy is based upon attraction rather than promotion. We need always maintain personal anonymity at the level of press, radio, and films. And 12, anonymity is the spiritual foundation of all our traditions, ever reminding us to place principles before personalities.
All right. Sean, would you come up and do the chips, please? Got a little bounce in this stuff there, that kid. Say, Pesky,
Hey, catch that. My name's Sean. I'm an alcoholic. And this group has a tradition on handing out chips with various lengths of sobriety. So if you have it, come up and get it, please. And the first one we offer is 24 hours. Next one is a red chip for 1 month. All right, come on up, Jay. Everybody, that's Jay. Next one we have is a gold chip for 2 months. Green chip for 3 months. Then we have a blue for 6. Purple for 9. Hey, Pete. Pete! That's Pete and Lewis, everybody, with 9 months. Next chip we offer is a red chip for 1 year. And then we flip it over for multiples. Thank you. Oh, you got it. Hey! Woo! 28 years. Good job, Art. That's Art, everybody, with 28 years.
Congratulations. All right, we're going to bring up our main speaker, Bill O. Thanks, Bill. Good to see you.
Holy cow, they got my name written down here. Wow, that's a pretty good looking group. I'm alcoholic. My name is Bill Ucci. I figure if you're going to look in the phone book and try to find me, you'll never find Bill O. Because there's lots of those. My home group is the 164 group in Tampa. My sobriety date is May the 19th, 1988. And I never know what I'm going to say from this podium, but the last prayer I said before I got out of my seat was, God, I'm going to move my lips tonight, and I hope you will do the talking. So if my talk isn't very good, blame God, because it won't be. I grew up in an alcoholic household. Father left when I was 7, and alcohol came into my life shortly thereafter. And I got to tell you, I was always, from way before that, the kid who didn't fit in. And when I found alcohol, all of a sudden, I was okay with me. And it happened at a 4th of July party at the family of the man who would be my stepfather, later on. And big family and a bunch of drinkers, and somebody thought it would be cool to see the kids tipsy. And they saved my life that day. I chased that for a long time, that feeling, the ability to fit in. I don't have a long time to talk tonight, so I'm going to try to buzz through and get to the meat of the deal, and that's the solution to this thing. I do want to tell you some things so you'll know that I'm really an alcoholic. I brought my stepfather's car home when I was 16 once with a bullet hole in the back because I was out chasing beer. Quit school at 16, joined the military at 17 because they would make me a man. They taught me how to drink as good as I thought I already knew. I spent 6 years in the military and did not get an honorable discharge due to alcohol and drugs. Drugs are part of my story, but they have absolutely nothing to do with my alcoholism. I'm going to tell you today that I'm an alcoholic because when I put it in my body, I lose the choice. I cannot stop. I have learned from some doctors in AA that alcohol has absolutely no addictive qualities. It's an allergy that I have. It's an allergy that we have. And what I have found is one solution that I know of. Now, maybe there's some others out there, but this one works. I know because I have proof in my own life. I struggled through my 20s. Lived in a cardboard box for a time. When it got cold, I called my mother up and asked if I could come stay at home. And of course, she had rules. I had to find a job. I didn't want to find a job at that point in my life. And this was not the second time that she saved me. She was in Al-Anon before I was born. With my father, who we have since found out that he died an alcoholic death. My stepfather also died an alcoholic death. And many of my relatives died an alcoholic death. So I feel today that I'm very blessed to be here. And though I couldn't have told you in the very beginning that God had brought me here, what I could tell you was that I was scared, and the day I walked in the door, I knew I couldn't drink safely anymore. However, I'll wrap up that last little bit. I was in jail for the final time, doing a violation of probation, 2-month deal, and they brought these meetings in. They were ADAP meetings, county-run meetings, and I was sentenced to go to those as long with this 2 months. And I thought, I'm running the show because I am the center of attention. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm locked up here for 2 months. I got to go to 4 of these ADAP meetings, so I'll do it while I'm in jail, and I won't have to worry when I get out. So the good news was that a young man came in and said the thing that stuck in my head, which I discounted at the time. I got out of jail, and of course, the guy from ADAP called me up and said, you'll be there Wednesday, right? I'm like, no, I did that while I was in jail. And, he laughed. And he said, no, that doesn't count when you're in jail. So I had 4 of these ADAP meetings to do. And I had gotten out on a Thursday, didn't want to go home because, in my mind, with my delusional thinking, the woman that I lived with, it was all her fault. I did the crime, I'm doing the time, but that wasn't how I thought back then. So I didn't go home. I slept out on the beach and ran into 2 of the jail guards out on the beach in the morning. They were fishing with a big cooler of beer. They offered me a beer, and for probably the first time ever, I turned down any form of alcohol because I remembered I was going to try not to drink. And, you know, it was probably 8 o'clock in the morning when I saw him, and then, you know, by 9:30, 10, it was starting to get a little warm out. And the sweat on those beers looked like maybe it would be okay to have just one. And, you know, God works in some strange ways, because I remember popping the top and drinking about half of that beer on the first gulp. And I woke up the next morning 100 miles away, sleeping on somebody's floor, and no idea how I got there. And the first thought that came to me was what this kid said in jail. He said, I know I'm alcoholic because when I pick up the first one, I never know how much I'm going to drink or where I'm going to end up. Now, I lost a lot of time drinking in blackouts because I've always been a blackout drinker, but never quite that fast. And I was amazed because, you know, I was the guy who would drink a case of beer and we'd be having a great time. But the first beer put me in this blackout. I was scared to death. And like I said, on Sunday night, this ADAP guy calls, and thank God he called, because I didn't know anything about Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't know how to get here. I didn't know that there was a solution. Because as intensely as I thought I was listening, I never, even those 4 ADAP meetings, I never heard, go to AA. I didn't hear it. I got to the last one 4 weeks later, which was May the 18th, 1988, and I didn't know what to do because I was staying sober from Wednesday to Wednesday. And this guy, same guy who called me, he laughed. He said, hadn't you listened to a thing we've been saying? We've been telling you to go to AA. And he breaks out this meeting schedule for Stuart, Florida. And there's a little map of downtown Stuart, Florida with Confusion Corner and Fellowship Hall. And he said, great meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. And he pointed to it on the schedule. He said, great meeting, be there. Well, you know, I was afraid who might find out I was a drunk. So when I drove down there, excuse me, I drove down there and here's this big crowd of people outside this building, and I knew it was them. And so I drove by and trying to keep a straight face, and I drove by a few times around the block, and, you know, right there at 7, I came around the corner and nobody was there. I thought, great, so now I can park, and I parked 6 blocks away. And not for lack of parking spaces. I then walked around the block, and I'm thinking, Bill, you got to go in there. Bill, you got to go in there. But I knew there was an 8:30 meeting. It was on the schedule. I'm thinking, I don't want to go in after the meeting started. And sure enough, I turned the corner at 8 o'clock, and here's this crowd, and I'm like trying to, I have my blue blazer on because it'll protect you from anything. And I'm walking straight, excuse me, you know, and I'm around the block, and at 8:30, I slipped in. The back door was open to let the smoke out. And I slipped in the back door. There was one seat in the corner. There was a woman with huge red hair, and that was my shield. You know, I was scoping the room out, using her as my shield to see who might see me, who might know me, you know. And the only guy I recognized was the chairperson. And I'm thinking, man, I hope he doesn't look this way. Or if he does, you know, that I'm hiding at the proper time. But the steps were up on the wall behind him, and I had heard of the 12 steps, but I didn't know anything about them. And I realized that I was very powerless over alcohol. However, I've lived outdoors, I've eaten out of dumpsters, I've given blood to drink, you know, and today, walking into AA, I live in a house, got a car, got a pretty little girlfriend, and a job. How can my life be unmanageable? And I got to tell you, that stuck with me and held me back for a long time. The good news was I knew 100% that I was powerless over alcohol, and I held on to you people, I held on to the chairs, the tables, and the fellowship for quite some time. And I can tell you, if you're new, do not do that. It is a miserable, miserable existence. I'm trying to work these steps. I'm going to big book meetings. I'm going to step studies. And, you know, I remember having about 6 months, and some guy with 3 months comes in, and my sponsors got me on the 4th step. And I would rush home. Now, I don't have a sponsor. I got a guy that I call, but, you know, he seems to degrade me every time I call him. So, you know, so I'm going home. I'm going to work. This guy ain't passing me by, you know, and that's how this was for me. And so I'd write that first name and 15 pages about what that son of a gun had done to me. And I'm thinking, man, there's a lot on this list. I'll never finish this. And, of course, it would go right to the trash. And with about 2.5 years sober, the knot in my gut had grown to a size that my stomach should have been sticking out. I was in so much emotional and mental pain because I hadn't done this work. I'm carrying around all that stuff that I brought into AA, and I hadn't done anything for a solution. And I found myself on the pool deck in my backyard with a taste of gun oil in my mouth because I was ready to go. It was okay to die, but it wasn't okay to drink. I knew I was powerless over alcohol. And God intervened that night, and somebody walked up the side yard. How that happened, I don't know. But of course I had to hide the gun because my ego wasn't going to let you know that I was going to do something like that. The next day the teacher showed up. And I went down to the fellowship hall. I plastered on my best AA smile. So when he said, "Hi Bill, how you doing?" I said, "Great, how are you?" And he looked at me dead in the eye, and excuse my French, but I'm going to say it. He said, "Bullshit." And he asked me if I wanted to change my life. And I could quote this big book pretty well, but I didn't know how to live it. And he took me out to the picnic bench there in downtown Stuart, Florida, and we opened the book at the very front, and we started reading the book. And he helped me to see how my life was unmanageable. It had nothing to do with stuff out here. He helped me to understand how I was insane, because that insanity certainly was not, in my mind, applicable to this alcoholic. And then he got on his knees and put his hands out, and he says, "Come on down here. I think you're ready for the 3rd step prayer." And I looked down at him, and I was like, "Well, what are you doing down there?" He says, "We're going to hold hands and pray." And of course, I got every excuse in the book, and I'm just like, "Well, we're in downtown Stuart, Florida here." He said, "That's okay." My next excuse was, I don't know the prayer. And of course, he pops the book open, he lays it down, he said, "Just read it." And I'm like, okay. Well, I got on my knees, looked around, grabbed his hands, read the prayer about as fast as I could, and I was up looking to see who saw that. And this guy didn't move. Now, he had hair about halfway down his back, he had a full beard, he looked like some pictures you see in buildings like this one. Hands still out, looking up at me. And I'm just like, what's up with that? He said, "Well, now, Bill, that you can do it, how about we do it right this time?" And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I got to do that again?" And he said, "Well, you told me you're willing to go to any length." He said, "I'll bet you didn't feel nothing off that last time." I said, "No, just a little embarrassment." And he said, "This time, why don't you just forget about everything? Because this is your life. And you'll probably try to kill yourself again if you don't do this." And he said, "Just think about the words in the prayer." And I read the prayer much slower that time, and I thought about the words. Somewhere in the middle of that prayer, every hair on my body stood up. And I knew I had had a spiritual experience because I knew when I got up from that prayer that things were going to be different. And we brought out the Big Chief notepad, and we worked the 4-step right out of the book. The directions are all there. I couldn't see the directions because they had that neat little picture. You ever been to a big book meeting where you're reading out of the book and you get to where that 4-step picture is? They always read it across. See, I thought that's how it worked, and the instructions are totally different than that. Follow the instructions and your life will change. And before I knew it, 2-3 hours went by. I had everything on paper, and I sat down and talked with this guy for about 4 hours. And then he told me, I could go home for an hour, think about what I had done, and when I was done with that, to call him. The good news is I went to his house and we got to do the 7-step prayer indoors. My life changed severely that day. The next day I was out making amends, and I had some pretty serious amends to make. I remember that first day in AA when I made my first attempt, and I use that word attempt loosely, to make amends to my mother. Now keep in mind that I was 29, she had been an Al-Anon probably 30 or 31 years at the time, and I had worked those steps so well that when I got home from that first meeting, I called her to make amends, and she laughed heartily, I got to tell you, for several minutes. And I thought she was laughing at me, and finally, and I could almost hear her wiping the tears of laughter out of her eyes, she said to me, "Bill, if you never drink again, that will be amends enough for me." You know, and I will never forget those words. And she has been an inspiration. And since then, I've made lots of amends to my mother and to my family. And they call this old cardboard box living drunk for advice nowadays. How does that happen? Anyway, I kept coming to AA, and, you know, they threw me into general service real early. I was about 5 months sober, and this 350-pound biker guy with 17 earrings in each ear, rings on every finger, and if he hit you with one of them, they would cut you. Carried a knife on his side, and, you know, he's sitting back. I had gone to this meeting. I wasn't really a home group member, but I went to the meeting every week. And after the meeting, I went to the bathroom, and they're having this little meeting. And I wanted to check it out. And this guy's leaning back in his chair up against the wall, and he goes, "We need a GSR, and you're it." Well, my response was, "What do I have to do?" This guy was scary, you know. Anyway, they told me what to do, and the next Tuesday, 2 days later, I showed up at my first district meeting, and something was different here. You know, the light that I saw in people's eyes was different. And so I went to the next district meeting, and I made a commitment not to miss any of these. And the next month was my first quarterly, and that was October of 1988. And there were 500 drunks there, all sober, having a great time. And the light in their eyes was another tenfold beyond the tenfold I had already seen. I didn't know what to think, but I knew I never wanted to miss one. Well, last month, I made my 94th quarterly business meeting in a row because I've made that commitment not to miss any. And I got to tell you, it has been a ride. The work in the steps, the living by these principles have brought so many blessings into my life. You know, I started out as a GSR, scared to death, not knowing what to do, and before I knew it, my term was up and I became a DCM. And I'm doing these 8 groups and going to visit them and help them out, and, you know, and I started out not having a clue what to do. And by the time I start to learn the job, guess what? It's time to get out of that one and get another job. And nobody had taken care of the archives for a couple of years, and I thought, well, I kind of like history, so I stood for the position of archives chair. And I was, you know, I didn't know what to do. I was a one-person committee. And my report every month in the beginning was, "I'm alcoholic, my name is Bill, chairman of the archives. Not much happening this month. Thanks for letting me share." And I had these boxes of stuff in my house, and every now and then I'd pull some of the stuff out, and there was some pretty old stuff. It was pretty cool. I'd read some of it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And I'd go to the archives meeting at the area, and they were saying catalog stuff, and I'm thinking, how the heck do you do that? I don't have a clue. And you know, the guilt and remorse of not really doing anything and having this position started to build up. And I finally called the sponsor that I had, and he said, "Well, Bill, why don't you ask for help?" Duh. So I get up in the next meeting, and I say, "Well, not much going on, but I would really like if any of the new GSRs would like to get on the archives committee. We have some spaces for you." And you know, I got one, then I got a second, and before I knew it, I had a 12-person committee We had everything cataloged. We built some district trees, and we were taking them out and showing them all over the place. And it was unbelievable. And all I did was one thing, ask for help. And I have found that anything I need help with, if I can knock my ego down just enough to ask for help, I'll get more help than I ever need. And a lot of people started telling me I should, at the end of that 2-year deal, stand for district chair. And I'm thinking, well, the alternate chair always rotates into the district chair. And they said, that's not a hard and set rule. And so I called my service sponsor, and he said, if you're qualified, which you are, you don't have the right not to stand. And I stood, and we got to the hat, and the other gentleman withdrew his name, which was a little sad. But I became the district chair, and that was quite an interesting ride, because I found out when you're the district chair, you have no opinion. Now, I'm a very opinionated man, but I couldn't let you know that, which is a little sad. But anyway, I served as the district treasurer after being the district chair, and I was asked by my friend John Sarvella, God rest his soul, to be on the finance committee. And so I'm serving on this finance committee, and we were real close to the end of that 2-year rotation, and it was the second to last quarterly in the rotation. And John was in the hospital, and he calls me up, and he said, Bill, I'm in the hospital. I can't come and chair the meeting or give the report. So can you chair the meeting and give the report? And I'm just like, well, the chair of the meeting sounds like no problem. There's only like 5 people there. But giving the report in front of 500, I don't know about all that. He said, you can do it. And I did it. And I got to tell you, it was a little scary, but once I got it done, it was okay. And 3 days after that quarterly, John passed away. Very sad. But the area chairman called me up to be the finance chair for the last quarterly of that rotation. And I agreed to do that, except that, it was budget presentation time. And, the finance chair always got lambasted, and I was scared to death. So I called my service sponsor, and he gave me some really good advice. I followed the advice, and when they asked for questions or comments, the room was silent. I was like, thank you, God. Anyway, we had elections that October, and I didn't get elected to anything, but I did stand, because my service sponsor told me I did not have the right not to stand and serve Alcoholics Anonymous, the thing that got me sober and saved my life. And I didn't get elected, but the chairman of the area saw how willing I was to serve and called me and asked me to be the finance chair for the next 2 years. I mean, what an honor. I got to serve those 2 years, and then they threw me up at the dais and handed me $50,000 and said, take care of our treasury. Now, I'm a liar, cheat, and a thief. You heard some of that in my early part of my story. And here they hand me the checkbook and say, do it. And I spent 2 years as treasurer. And it's just amazing how God works in your life. Because while I had this treasury, and sometimes that money was close to $70,000, I never once had the thought that I could write myself a check. The checks coming in were like pieces of paper, part of the tools I needed to do my job. And I made the little reports, and I sent the checks out, and that was that. It was just so awesome. In the old days, man, I'd have come up with some elaborate plan, Then I served as 2 years as the area chairperson. Again, reminded, this time even more so, you have no opinion. And that was a very interesting job, and I learned a lot doing that. I then served 2 years as alternate delegate, and then advanced on and served as your delegate to South Florida in 2007 and 2008. Some of you I met at my delegate reports up here at the little, is that a clubhouse? I don't know. But I remember coming up here, and this group has always been friendly up here in Newport Richey, and I enjoy coming up here to talk to you folks. Since then, I'm like a has-been now as a past delegate, but I do still have a job as a co-chair of a committee. That's one of the commitments you make when you stand for delegate, is you commit to 6 years 2 as delegate, and then 2 more, or 4 more on current practice committee, which is keeping our just book of bylaws basically in order. That will be over at the end of this year, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do for service, but I've already stuck my fingers into my group and stuck my fingers into the district, because what I have learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that if I don't put my hand out to give back something, I'm screwed. That's what this whole thing is about. You know, you guys loved me when I could not love myself. And, you know, I still have tough days. But I found what it says in that book, when times are tough, go find a drunk to talk to. You know, we took a guy to the hospital on Monday, and what a blessing. I think he got out Wednesday, and I called him. A couple other guys called him, and today, or last night actually, he called me late, real late. And I stayed on the phone with him for a couple of hours, and today I took him back to the hospital, and he reserved himself a bed in a, it's ACTS, I don't know if it's like a treatment center or a halfway, I'm not sure exactly what it is. I've been there for meetings, but I don't know what they would call it. He had made lots of phone calls before he called me this morning, and I think maybe he's finally ready. I've been trying to help this man get sober for a couple, 3 years now, and you know, he's close to the end. His stomach is distended because his liver is shot, and it's just a sad thing. But you know, the joy it brings. I stopped by his house today, and he had no idea I was coming. I called him on the phone. He said, "Hello." I said, "Shut up and get in the truck." What? Anyway, it was good. I love that old school AA. We'll see what happens. Hopefully he will grasp on this time. Otherwise, he's probably going to die like my father did. Let me tell you a little story. I think I got a little bit of time left. There's a glare on the clock. I can't even see it. I'm going to tell you a little story about how God works in my life sometimes. And sometimes I'm delusional and think he's working, and sometimes he's really working. And this story is a fairly recent story. It happened in 2010, and part of my thinking was delusional, and most of it was God-centered. I belong to this little motorcycle organization, and they sent me an email, and there was a thing on there for this ride. It was called a challenge because they couldn't call it a race on public roads. The challenge was to go from Key West to Homer, Alaska, and the first one there who followed all the rules would win $500,000. Now, my finances were pretty crappy at the time, and I'm, you know, when I first looked at it, I got to tell you, I dismissed it. I said, I can't do that. Well, I could do that because I have the capability, but I can't take the time to do that, is what I thought to myself, and I dismissed the email. And the next morning I got up and I had my little half-an-hour meditation, and I do a little reading in the morning, and then I try to meditate and clear my mind and try to let God in to run my day. And all I could see was the banner on that website in my head. And I'm trying to clear my head. I read a little bit more. I said, okay, God, I'm trying to get close to you here. And here comes this banner. Well, I was unsuccessful in my thinking of clearing my thoughts that morning. And I went to work and I thought about this thing all day long. And I got home and I thought, I'm going to try this again. And I did some more reading. And I sat down and I said, okay, maybe you're trying to tell me to go look at this thing again. And this time I went, dug out the email and read through the whole website, and I started to get the feeling of being inspired. Now I'm thinking that I'm, delusional thinking. But I called my sponsor because something felt right about it. And I called my sponsor, and what he said to me was, Bill, if you don't go out and live life, it's not going to come knocking on your door. Well, that kind of said, you can do it. However, it didn't tell me whether or not that was God talking to me. So now he's a pretty spiritual man, so maybe that was his way of saying God's telling you to do this. But I was on Facebook, and I put a little blurb out there, and I'd like to do it, and I really didn't have the money even for the entry fee, much less the rest of the deal. And within a week, people, some that I didn't even know, had committed more than enough money to do this thing. And then I realized that God was in charge here. And so I prepped myself for this thing. Being a master outdoorsman, and one of the rules was you will sleep outside. Being a master outdoorsman, proof by living in a cardboard box, that I knew I could do this. So I got to Key West, checked in, and the ride got started, and what a awesome ride across this country. And what I found was, I made a decision when I started, if I need help, I'm going to ask. And I asked a lot of people for help along the way because the directions were a little screwy. And I got more help than I ever needed because I asked for help. Anyway, I got into Alaska, and we were about 100 miles outside of Anchorage. I believe I was in the top 5 and had a chance at that $500,000 to straighten my finances out. And come off a curve, and there was a manhole cover in my path. So I had an impromptu flying lesson. I was sideways in the air, and I looked up and I said, I guess today's my day to come meet you. And to this day, I'm thinking, was my thought along the lines of, why did you bring me to Alaska to die? The bike bounced 3 times, all 3 times on the wheels. And I pulled it over, never lost control. I don't know how that happened. It certainly wasn't me. I've taken plenty of motorcycle safety courses over the years. That's something you cannot practice. And I knew that God saved my life that day. That bike should have tumbled and gone over the cliff, and I should have been down there with it. But what I found out, I got myself into Anchorage. The bike was totaled because we bent the frame, and the oil pan was cracked. The oil left the bike. Otherwise, I would have hobbled it to the finish line. But the next day was the party that they had down in Homer, Alaska, and I went down there in a rental car. Anyway, I think I left about 9:30 that night, and funny how things work out. Homer is about 4 hours south of Anchorage, and I think it's 4 hours is what they tell you. Anyway, it's a windy road up the coast. It's really an awesome drive, but I was exhausted, and I started finding out on my way back, and they have these pull-offs, and I pulled off, took a little nap, and got moving again, and I pulled off, took a little nap, and got moving again, and the third time, there was a gas station. I parked there and took another little nap because I just couldn't keep my eyes open, and when I opened my eyes, I found out I was only about 30 miles outside Anchorage. I was almost there. But I got a cup of coffee, I missed my exit, and I knew I had to go to the west and then back south, and so I get off the highway and find the street that my hotel's on, and the traffic slows, and I look to the left, and there is the Alano Club. You see, God works so many strange things in this thing. What a sense of humor. There's a couple people out in the parking lot. I've got no idea what time it is. Well, it happened to be 6:25 a.m., and the meeting started at 6:30. I met a young man named John. John couldn't hold a half a cup of coffee. He was shaking so bad. That's my kind of drunk. And I talked to John after the meeting. I tried to take him to a detox, and you know John's response. You all already know it. I got things to do. But John showed up the next morning, and the next morning I brought my book with me, and we sat down and we started reading this book. John still calls me about every couple of weeks. John's taken over 100 men in a year and a half through this book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Most of them have stayed sober. And that is why God took me to Alaska. My finances are still screwed up. But I have the blessing to know that something that God helped me to do had some impact on somebody's life. Thanks for letting me share.